All right, welcome to Code Along with Alex. Today's session, we're going to be doing um, some CI/CD for an application using GitHub Actions. I shared the link in the Discord chat, but also it'll be in the YouTube description for those that are watching asynchronously. So if we go and toggle to the Docker docs, this is the language specific guide for Python. But this lesson doesn't actually use any Python. So you're really just doing YAML editing and cloning stuff with the GitHub user interface. So I think that this is the same lesson they use in all of the language guides. Like so for JavaScript, um, Go, Java, and Python. So I think it's kind of generic, but it has some useful stuff regarding GitHub Actions and will give us some experience using these tools. So at a high level, today we're going to set up a GitHub Actions CI/CD pipeline, and we're going to use Docker containers. Before getting started, the writers or the team at Docker suggests you check out this blog post, which I'll share in the chat as well. And I'll include that in the video description. Okay. So we're going to use a sample Docker project, which is called Simple Whale Demo. And that'll just, so we don't have to worry about configuring or building an app and configuring actions. I'm kind of disappointed that the Docker team didn't use the example that we built for these previous 3 lessons that we've covered so far. But I understand it could be too much to manage those CI/CD lessons across all those languages for their team, but it's still kind of a bummer. Then after we're going to clone this repo or fork it and clone it, set up a GitHub Actions workflow, and then we're going to optimize that workflow just to minimize number of pull requests that it triggers and the build time, just because that's useful for us as an engineering team in this hypothetical example. And then finally, we're just going to push specific versions to Docker Hub. And so I guess to follow along live, you would want to have a GitHub account and a Docker Hub account. But if you're just kind of watching, don't worry about it. But yeah, if you want to follow along, I encourage you to, well, you need a GitHub account and a Docker Hub account. And then we're going to work through the steps regarding kind of configuration and some API key configuration, basically. So to get started, we're going to get our kind of toy application that's been pre-built by the Docker team. So it's just a simple project called Simple Whale Demo, and it has an Nginx Alpine image. And they say you can either clone this repository or use your own Docker project. Today, we're just going to clone this repo, but maybe in a future iteration, we'll use our own Docker project. But I'm going to toggle to the GitHub repo now. So you can see that it's just a kind of pretty basic application and has a Docker file with some instructions, who the maintainer is. It's an Nginx Alpine image, like they say in the docs. Pretty basic. It's copying it to a location in the container. Here's some code. It's really an index.html file. And then some images that'll be displayed somewhere. And then the GitHub workflow, or the GitHub actions, live in the .github/workflows repo or subdirectory. And this is where they've defined some actions already, but we'll get into that in a little bit. So to start, I'm going to fork this repo into my account. I always forget how to do this. Oh yeah, there it is. Don't have any forks. So I'll just create a fork. Call it simple whale demo, and then fork for code along session about CI CD with Docker. Now we're just going to copy the master branch, and it's going to be in my personal GitHub. It'll be in your personal GitHub, whatever that is. So I created this fork. Cool. You can see it's pretty stable too. It hasn't been updated since 2020, so I don't think there's gonna. I expect that it works, but we'll see. You never know. So I'm gonna return to the docs now, and we're good to go. Now we have to start some configurations, and so the authors are saying we need to access Docker Hub so that we can create some tokens, or we need to access our Docker Hub ID and put that into GitHub as a secret key. And then we also need to create a key in Docker Hub that we're going to share with GitHub as well. So to start, let's add our Docker ID as a secret to GitHub. So I'm going to go to the GitHub window again. And so we go to settings, secrets, and then there should be a new secret. I guess I'll just do actions. Yeah. So I guess they haven't updated in a minute, or to the GitHub UI. So we're going to create a new repository secret. We're going to call the name of the secret Docker Hub username. And then my Docker Hub username is this, or my Docker ID. And so now we can add the secret, and you can see now we have a repository secret called Docker Hub username. Sweet. I'm gonna toggle back to the Docker docs. So now we're going to create a new secret with the name we just did that. We're going to create a new personal access token in Docker Hub. And then we're going to share that as a second secret into the GitHub secrets UI. So to start, let's go to my Docker Hub. So it says to go to, I think it's account settings. No, it's not here. Let me just copy the link. Settings/security. There we go. Okay, so we're going to create a personal access token and then copy the value to GitHub. So we're going to click new access token in the Docker Hub UI. We're going to give it a name of simple whale CI. Leave the access permissions as the default read write. There's different options for your use case. And then we're going to click generate. You can see that it's slightly changed the experience from when the docs were written. Instead of saying cancel generate, the docs say cancel create, but it's basically the same experience. So we can proceed. So I'm going to click generate. And then you can see this is my personal access token. General security best practice, don't share this with other people. After this video is done recording, I'm going to delete this just for security perspective. But yeah, now that we have this, I'm going to go and add a new secret to the GitHub UI. So I'm going to click again the new repository secret button. This time we're going to call the secret Docker Hub Access Token. And then I'm going to see if I'm going to copy and close this. And then I'm going to paste this value here, add secret. And now you can see the user interface is updated with 2 repository secrets, a Docker Hub username and a Docker Hub access token. Cool. So now I'm going to return back to the Docker documentation. We've finished setting up the kind of API key connections we're going to have to work with. And from this point forward, it's predominantly just YAML, where we're going to be declaring how our repository is built for the CI/CD pipeline. So in the previous section, we created the personal access token in Docker Hub and then added it to GitHub so that we can access Docker Hub from any workflow. So this will just be super easy for us in our automations. So next, we're going to set up the GitHub Actions workflow to build and store our images in Docker Hub. And we can achieve this by creating 2 Docker actions. The first one is going to let us log into Docker Hub using the secrets we stored in GitHub. And then the second one is going to build and push the repository. And so you can see, like, you could put these into a single YAML file, but it's nice to kind of chunk things out and just easier maintenance burden for your team, especially as requirements change. So just kind of a more modular perspective can be applied not just to code, but to YAML configuration files. So in this example, we're going to set the push flag to true, as we also want to push. And then we're going to tag to specify to always go to the latest version of our application. And then finally, we're going to echo the image digest to see what was pushed. So first, we're going to set up a workflow in GitHub Actions. So I'm going to return to the repository in GitHub, my personal simple whale repo. And then we're going to navigate to the Actions pane and then click, or I guess understand my workflows, and go ahead and enable them. So we're enabling workflows on this forked repository. Sweet. So now we're going to click the new workflow button. So now we're going to click set up a workflow myself. There should be an option for that. It's kind of, I almost missed it. Just right here. So they have some pre-built connections that are helpful for you depending on your use case. But for us today, yeah, like this, it's pretty nice. All these kind of pre-built templates or presets for you, just convenient. Today, I'm just going to do it myself with the help of the Docker docs. So we're doing it as a team. Okay, so you can see we're going to name this workflow, or so it just automatically populates a main.yaml file for us in the .github/workflows subdirectory of our Simple Whale demo application. So to begin, let's declare some YAML, a name for our application. Then we're going to add how we want to run this workflow. So we're going to do it anytime there's a push to the master branch of our project, this GitHub action will run and test something about our software. So on push spelling is hard. Okay, I think I might have messed up this indentation a little bit. Yeah, it's too far. There we go. That's better. I don't know if YAML cares if your indentation is perfect, but I know some languages and formats do, so I just try to make things look okay by default. So let's actually check our application because there was a recent switch from using the term master to switching to main for your uh, predominant repo branch. So I don't actually know what it's called on my. So this one is master because it's an older repo, but generally now when you create a new repository, the default branch is called main. Okay, so master's fine on this example. Next, we're going to declare a jobs attribute that um, kind of just tells GitHub what we want to happen within our action. And so then we're going to add a build job and then specify that it runs on Ubuntu. So builds runs on. And so Ubuntu latest is just the latest version of the Ubuntu flavor of Linux operating system, or the Ubuntu distribution. It's made by the Canonical company. But yeah, Ubuntu is pretty common, so you'll see that pretty frequently in these kind of examples. Next, we're going to add a steps section. And so that's actually the same indentation as build within the jobs field area. I don't know the exact term, so apologies. So next we got name. So first we're going to check out repo. And that uses the action called action checkout at version 2. And so GitHub creates a bunch of like preset actions that we can invoke. And that's just like super, or preset steps that we can invoke in our actions, which is just super clutch and just simplifies the development of these kind of CI/CD pipelines. So like props to GitHub for doing that. I guess Microsoft. Next, we're going to do login to Docker Hub. That uses the Docker login action, version 1. And you can see that these teams or these companies are creating these kind of components that you can plug and play with GitHub Actions. So that's really nice. So if you're working on a project that maybe utilizes some other third-party utility, I encourage you to check out if maybe GitHub Actions has some sort of integration already built so you don't have to reinvent the wheel, because that's usually pretty annoying. It's not optimal. It can be fun, but doing the fun thing isn't always the right call, especially in a business context. So like if you can get a tool that's working and like good and not expensive, that's like ideal. Okay, so, and developing a new tool is expensive just because it takes time. So we have a username that we're pulling our secrets Docker Hub username, which is super cool. We can kind of just pull that from our repository without having to explicitly declare it in our configuration file here, which is version controlled, and it could potentially be public in an open source project. And so you can have certain admin users who are maybe able to see the repo secrets, and then the vast majority of users are just going to see this kind of macro or string interpolation that says secrets Docker Hub username, Docker Hub access token, because they don't actually need to know the details of the specific username or token. Okay. I don't know why that's so angry. Steps. Name. Weird. Duplicated mapping key. Doesn't like that for some reason. Steps, name, uses, and then log into Docker Hub. Bad indentation. What? Okay. So uses needs to be underneath steps. Then okay. That's why it was just the wrong level of indentation. Should be right. Name, uses. That's super weird. Whatever, let's keep going. I'm sure I'll see it in a second, and I just don't see it right now because I'm too close to it. Oh, that's what it is. It's a space. There we go. It's like, this is not working. Okay, that's much better. I thought, and it's broken again. It happens like this sometimes. Dude, that's weird. Steps. Name uses with. All right, let's just keep going. Let's see what's up. Maybe it'll resolve itself. And if not, we can just copy paste from the docs. And if that doesn't work, then we'll submit an issue to the docs team. So that actually has to have name. Yeah, I know it's bad indentation, bro. Uses, Docker, setup, build, X, action at v1. We got name, build, and push. We're going to ID Docker build, uses Docker build, push action version 2 with the context current directory using the Docker file in the current directory on push true. And then we're going to add a tag to Docker Hub, so that whenever our image is built, it appends our username with simple whale latest. Okay. Almost there. Let's add a couple extra lines. Finally, our last name action. Image digest. That's just gonna run the outputs of our Docker build, the digest specifically, using the echo command. Okay, getting close. Might be a typo or two somewhere, but we'll find it out when we try to run. Okay, so let's Yeah, it doesn't like that steps for some reason. A job requires either a run on or uses. Hmm. Runs on. Yeah. Interesting. It's weird. Now I guess it's because I use spaces some places, maybe, and tabs in others. So be consistent. Let's just fix these real quick. Doesn't like use it there. Interesting. The heck? Did you mean? Oh, yes, I did mean uses, not users. Good catch. Typos. It happens. Okay. So I think we're good to go. Now we can commit our changes and then we should be able to build our or run our job. So let's just commit our file. Okay, so there's already a file with that name in main. So let's just call it main Paka or main Codalong. Start commit. So let's open our main Codalong. There's been no runs. Unable to resolve action, check out at v2. Interesting. So if we go to Docker Hub, let's check my personal account and see if there's anything different here. No. Okay. So something is broken in the YAML. Let's make sure I copied and pasted everything correctly. Oh, yeah. So it's not action, it's actions. So it's just a typo on my part. It happens, man. It's just part of the game. Okay. Actions. So let's start commit. Fix typo in checkout. Repo step. Okay, now if we go to the runs again, you can see that it's in progress or it's queued. It's working, which is exciting. Everything is hopefully going to turn green in a matter of moments, but only time will tell. Yeah, it did. Great. So if we click on that workflow run, we can see that the code was successfully built. I mean, there's some like deprecation codes that are, because it's an old app using some stuff that's deprecated, but it's not really a problem for the purpose of this example. And you can see how the steps are being run, which is pretty cool. I'm going to check Docker Hub to see if anything interesting happened there. Don't necessarily expect it to have, but you never know. And you see we have a simple whale repository. Nice. And it just got updated a minute ago with that most recent run. So that's pretty cool. And then it'll have a tag that we created latest. Yeah. Okay, so now let's go back to our, oops, wrong one. Let's go back to our code. Just gonna sit in the workflows repo for a bit, and then we can toggle to our documentation. So now you'll notice that we're about halfway done with this session, and the remainder is really focused on kind of optimizing the existing configuration YAML so that it's, or actions YAML, so it's a little better, more performant. So let's see how we can do that. So we can use something called a build cache. Firstly, it'll reduce the build time since we won't have to re-download all the images. And it also reduces the number of pulls against Docker Hub. So that's just kind of nice. And so to implement this, we're going to have to use something called the GitHub cache. And so we're going to have to use something called a builder with a build cache to execute this functionality or implement it. So let's add the path and keys to store this under GitHub, or under using GitHub cache for this. So we're going to add this extra step to our code along configuration. So in this example, let us add the path and keys to store this under using GitHub cache for this. That's a weird sentence. Okay. And lastly, after adding the builder and build cache snippets to the top of the actions file, we need to add some extra attributes to the build and push step. Okay. Interesting. So I think we have to append this to the top of the YAML. And then we're going to append this to the bottom. Login. So I'm just trying to see how this changes our existing code. Okay, so this is like really just updating the login to Docker Hub step with some more, or no, the build and push. Okay. It's just integrating the cache with itself for future runs. All right, so let's update our YAML. So I'm going to return to GitHub. We got cache Docker layers. We're going to add this right below the steps as our first step. See, we're getting an error already. Bad indentation. Who knows why? Oh, it's just aggressively indented. Okay. Okay. Next, we're going to add or update some of the other paths. We're going to get the build and push step. We're going to take Docker build. Actually, we don't have to update anything there. Ooh, it's the width parameter. So the context is the same. The file's the same. Now we have to add a builder step. So that goes here. And I'm going to interpolate steps.buildx.outputs.name. Push is still true. Tags is still the same. Now we have to add two more fields. The cache from type equals local. Source equals /temp slash dot build x dash cache, and then cache 2 is going to be type equals local, destination equals slash temp slash dot build x dash cache, and then image digest step is the same. Let's save or commit our changes. So feat add caching of or Docker hub. Okay, now if we return to the runs page, let's run our workflow is just automatically running because it runs on push, which is pretty cool. That's how we set up our action, and now we can just wait for the result. And we'll determine whether the build cache was properly utilized by our program. Setup job. Okay, so it's just using some old style action language, which is in deprecated mode, which is fine. But that's cool. It looks like things were cached successfully. All right, now let's return to the documentation. So we just learned how to set up a GitHub Actions workflow to a Docker project and how to optimize it by setting up a builder with a build cache. Now we can even further improve our project by adding the ability to have the tagged versions behave differently to all commits to master. So like only specific versions are pushed instead of every commit updating the latest version on Docker Hub. Because like when you're in a development environment, you don't necessarily want every change to your source code to be built immediately. It just depends on your use case. And so having more fine-grained control about if all commits are pushed to build step, it's good. So we can consider this approach to have our commits go to a local registry and then for use in nightly tests, which is cool. That's a pretty common paradigm you see in software. So you can always test what is latest while reserving your tagged versions for release to Docker Hub. So kind of decoupling your development from your latest artifact for consumption so that there's some de-risking of using the product. So to do this, we're going to have to modify our GitHub workflow to only push commits with specific tags to the Docker Hub registry or to our Docker Hub. And then we have to set up a GitHub Actions file to store the latest commit as an image in the GitHub registry. I'm not sure if they mean repo by this, but we'll see. So first, let's modify our existing GitHub workflow to only push to the hub if there's a particular tag. So for example, you could only have it push on tags that match this particular string here. And this would ensure that the main continuous integration will only trigger if we tag our commits with vn period n. So version 0.0.1, etc. Okay. So let's test this. First, we have to update our action. So let's return to our repository. We'll go to the workflows directory, our main _code along YAML. Start editing it. So you see there's the on push. And so we're going to remove this branches master setting and add or replace it with a tags section. And the string to match kind of version syntax. Okay. Okay. So if we look at our action now, or runs, there should not have been a run just now because it was not of the tag specified in our trigger. Okay. So just to see this in action, I'm going to pop open a little terminal window just to make a trivial change for our program to see this in action. So let me clone this code. Okay. So I'm just gonna update the README so that there's a slight change that will be noticed when I tag and push to the origin. Tagged by Paka. Okay. So I'm just tagging this now as version 1.0.2. Tagged by Paka. And then let's add a commit message, and then we're going to push to origin version 1.0.2. And so now if we return to our workflow, code along, I guess so if we see simple whale demo, my README change was not absorbed. Interesting. Let's see the runs. Oh, no, it was. Very cool. Okay. So you can see that 30 seconds ago, another build was triggered because it matched to this event. No longer the master match, but now a version number, period number match. So that's cool. Okay. So let's return to the docs. We're getting close to the end. We're going to set up a second GitHub action file to store our latest commit as an image in the GitHub registry. And so you might want to do this to run nightly tests or recurring tests on your code, or to share work in progress images with colleagues. And so let's clone our previous GitHub action and add back in our previous logic for all pushes. So we're going to have two workflow files, our previous one and our new one now that we're going to work on. So I'm going to return back to the file, copy the contents, and then we're going to create a new YAML file. So I'm going to call this GitHub registry code along. .yaml. Paste in the YAML that they shared here, or that's our from our previous action, but now we just need to tweak it a little bit. So we want to change our Docker Hub login to a GitHub container registry login. So that's a little further down here. Where is that? Login to Docker Hub. If uses login action v1. So now we want to add registry, GitHub container registry, the username. It's now the GitHub actor, which is our GitHub username. And then our GitHub token. Okay, that looks good. Okay, and then remember to change how the image is tagged. So we don't want it to have the V. So I might just put it back to how we had it before with main. Where was that example? So hold on, build push. Interesting. Aggressive scrolling. So we need to replace this line here. In our code, namely the tags. I'm going to delete this and replace it with a GitHub container registry URL shared in the tutorial. Nice. And then finally, I'm going to find replace the matching in the tags so that it matches on push to master. Oops. Okay. So I think now we should be able to just save these changes, commit them, and then see if it works. So GitHub registry code along. Let's go to the build or the runs. It's thinking. It's exciting though. It's still thinking. And it worked. Let's investigate some of the details, see what's going on for us. It works. And if you want, you can inspect further details, but it's not too much information. It's a little bit. Okay. Yeah, there's more details as you expand these drop downs. But yeah, um, we created 2 flows, one for changes to master and one for our pull requests. Next, we need to modify what we had before to ensure we're pushing our PRs to the GitHub registry rather than to Docker Hub. Okay. So, kind of in conclusion, today we learned how to set up some GitHub actions, connect them to an existing Docker project, optimize the workflow to improve build times and reduce the number of pull requests required, and then finally how to push only specific versions to Docker Hub, which is pretty useful. We also looked into kind of how you might set up a nightly testing scheme with tags. And yeah, that's basically it. Um, Next time, we're going to look into deployment on Microsoft Azure and work through the final lesson in the language specific guide for Python on Docker. Thank you again for hanging out today. I really appreciate it and look forward to coding along with you in the future. So, with that, thanks and have a great day. Bye.